On February 1st, I had the opportunity to go on the youth ski trip, and I'm always interested in taking music requests from young people when traveling in my car. We ran through many tunes until finally the girls piped in and said that they wanted to listen to Hamilton, a musical that's near and dear to my family. But then I fast forward to February the 14th when my son John David and I finally got to our rental car in Denver, 9 o'clock at night, exhausted from a day of traveling. We started to drive up the mountain to go ski together. Snow was falling and I needed to plug my phone in for directions and some music. And again, Hamilton comes through. We were just too tired to change it. As we move up the mountain, we're listening to the unfolding renditions of our country's beginning. We hear the pains that led to our independence and our Constitution. You may recall King George's song in the musical where he attempts to express his love through threats, death, and control. He sings, "You'll be back. Soon you'll see, you'll remember you belong to me. Oceans rise and empires fall, and when push comes to shove, I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love." Oh, our human love, right? Yet Jesus says today, I say to you, listen, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. After facing an armed battalion and when the battle is over, reconciliation is still the final goal that God has for us. Now, forgiveness does not mean that we forget or return to harsh circumstances before. But forgiveness means that we look forward with the desires to live in peace. As the prayer says, it's in the peace of God which surpasses all of our understanding. This is what happens today in our reading from Genesis. Joseph returns to find his brothers who had sold him into slavery in Egypt. Joseph does not let anger prevail for their wrongs against him. Instead, he brings a stretched out heart, eager for that reconciliation. You see, Joseph was living into his spiritual body, which Paul speaks about today in the letter to the Corinthians. Joseph had let any legitimate grudge against his brothers to die. And his new relationship with them has become a resurrection. Paul's letter speaks of our bodies being born only physical, but can become spiritual too. And Jesus shows us the path to forgiveness is the path to forming our spiritual body. Forgiveness clears the hardened heart of hatred in order for only love to prevail. And also, loving our enemies, we disarm them from controlling us. Yes, we can be physically restrained like Joseph was as a slave. Yet since the love of God, even though we can be restrained physically, with God's love, spiritually, we cannot. So holding discord or control over another keeps us physically imprisoned, while holding love over any discord ushers in God's Spirit to be actively engaged in our world. Friends, the good news in the gospel reading today is in the last line where Jesus says, for the measure that you give will be the measure that you get back. Join me in imagining the length of love progressing like different tools that we have for measurement. You can start with the ruler. How long is a ruler? Do y'all know? A foot, yeah. So we start with a foot. And so if this is the measure of your love, you could think about it like this. You might have a handshake, but you're still keeping it close to your heart, right? You might go in for a hug, but you're also ready to defend yourself if you need to. But this is the starting place. So then we might think about a yardstick. Does anyone know how long a yardstick is? 3 feet. So now we've got to this place where we're actually like reaching out, which is exposing our hearts, right? But yet we could still come back quickly if we need to defend our hearts. This takes us further out, exposes us to more potential physical harm. And Jesus addresses concern for our human harm in saying, if they strike you on the cheek, give them the other one to hit as well. For Jesus to tell us as we measure our love beyond the sense of reason, builds our faith and moves us into the discovery of peace. Jesus says a good measure will be put into your lap. So 1 foot, 3 feet. How about 25 feet? When our measure goes further and further out, we wait for it to break. Now, the Lord was with me at 8 o'clock because I got it out farther than I ever have before. Oh, goodness. 10 feet. 11 feet. Oh. 12 feet. Even when it breaks, you can continue to push it out farther and farther. It might not be in the air, but the sense of that you can still get to your destination. Now, the reason, there's a crack in the floor. Oh my goodness. Okay, I will leave that there. I'll preach on that somehow. We think about as it goes, and it does break. And what I found, and for those of you who work with wood a lot more than I do, once you get to 24 feet, are these words. It says, attention, caution, stop. Stop when you've hit that mark. And if we think about reaching out as much as we can, it is there that we are most vulnerable, and it is also there when we are the most freed, living into our physical body as well as our spiritual body. Joseph's story today in Genesis ends with him kissing all of his brothers and weeping on them. And it is in that act that they finally begin to talk to him. You see, his spiritual being allowed God's peace to usher in through the extended measure of his love. Joseph's measure given to his brother was enough to reach them all the way. He gave them probably 25 miles or more of himself. And when they opened even a foot to him, whether in a hug or a handshake, it was enough for God's healing spirit to come into their lives together. The forgiveness allowed them to bond despite the brokenness that has been in their hearts. Is this not so with life? Often it takes one of us to go beyond all measure because the reconciliation of a relationship is so important. God sent his son into the world, knowing that this world would break his physical body. Earthly kings, rulers, and empires may take a physical life. However, it is the spiritual body that stretches beyond the constraints of this world and into being connected with God. The physical body cannot be harmed because God's love is stronger and more powerful than any fully armed battalion. The character of King George in Hamilton's song says, "I will kill your friends and family and remind you of my love." The good news tells us Jesus responds with the golden rule, not just followed in Christianity, but followed in every religion in the world. Do to others as you want them to do to you. Lengthen our measure of love. We love longer, we love harder than they might be able to even love us, trusting that God will give us strength, God will bring us, and hopefully the other that we are reaching out to, this peace. And when we find that peace, as our gradual hymn ended today, is there we can be lost in wonder, love, and praise. Amen.